Oh howdy all, grab yourself a drink, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Grinding Gear Games today have continued putting out 2 teasers a day, one of which is a support gem and one of which is something else. But it's probably a bit juicier than yesterday because we got the Kirac Mods today, and the Kirac Mods have a big impact on the way that the league tends to play out. And Atlas strategies sometimes live or die based upon whether there's Kirac Mods that support them or not. And the Kirac Mods we'll get to in a sec. But firstly, Spellblade Support. This was teased showing a video of a character just running around killing monsters using Arc. This doesn't really provide any information about what the gem does. All we've got is a 2-sentence summary. Spells supported by Spellblade Support have added spell damage equal to a percentage of the damage of the equipped one-handed melee weapons. Whoever set a sword couldn't channel magic just as well as a wand anyway. Now this has some little similarities to Spellslinger support, but Spellslinger support is also a very different animal as well. And interestingly, Spellslinger support only provides half damage if you are dual wielding wands. It is quite plausible that Spellblade support will have a similar line of text on it. Now what we want to talk about with Spellblade support is that this is in a difficult spot because it is competing with other weapon alternatives. Now I think that there is a clear spot where this is going to be amazing, and there's a bunch of other spots where it all comes down to the numbers, but where I don't have high expectations for this. One of the big questions with Spellblade support is how it will interact with Energy Blade. Energy Blade is one of the weirdest skills in Path of Exile. It is a buff that is both a blessing and a curse. The curse component is that it lowers your maximum energy shield, and this is something that you definitely want to use in conjunction with a very large energy shield pool, so that can be a fairly significant drawback. However, the upside of Energy Blade, and this is a big upside, is that it completely overwrites the stats on your weapon, replacing it with an Energy Blade. This Energy Blade has tremendous added lightning damage on it. Absolutely phenomenal amounts of lightning damage, and the amount of lightning damage that it has is based entirely upon the amount of energy shield your character's got. If Energy Blade is able to be used in conjunction with Spellblade support, and there's no evidence that it can't be at the moment, then this is going to be a powerful combination that could potentially add a very, very, very large amount of lightning damage to spells, which is then something that compensates for you losing out on any ability to scale your spells through gem levels that you would otherwise get a lot of on your weapon, or alternately through using really powerful unique weapons. So let's start with the competition it's going to face. The staff, the Annihilating Light. If you're playing in softcore, the Annihilating Light is the highest damage option for almost every build. The Annihilating Light's benefit of dealing triple damage with elemental skills is roughly commensurate with the power boost that you would get from +9 to gem levels. It does vary a little bit from skill to skill, but that's a rough rule of thumb. Obviously, the Annihilating Light is completely useless in conjunction with Spellblade support, and so it's going to be either you use the Annihilating Light and not Spellblade, or you use a Spellblade-oriented weapon and you use Spellblade support. This is part of the competition that this new support gem faces. The Annihilating Light has a huge drawback of giving you 60 to 70% reduced magnitude of all modifiers that affect resistances on your character. This is a huge deal, but it is manageable, and ultimately the Annihilating Light is one of the best options even despite this huge drawback. Now the other thing that it competes with is Battlemage. Battlemage is something that the Inquisitor can get for 2 points. Most people don't take it because there's 8 really good points in the Inquisitor that don't include this, but it is an option in the Inquisitor Ascendancy, and it's also available on a couple of specific weapons. What Battlemage does is it grants the player character additional spell damage equal to the damage of your main handed weapon. And this is found on Martyr of Innocence, Disintegrator and Nycta's Lantern among weapons. You can also get it on any weapon with Cadigan's Crown, but Cadigan's Crown's drawback, never dealing critical strikes, is pretty overwhelming, and most builds just cannot justify a drawback that severe in order to gain Battlemage. What I want to do here is take one example spell. I'm going to use Wave of Conviction as an example here, but a lot of other spells will be quite similar. And I'm going to have a look at the sorts of numbers that would be needed in order for this to be a good option. Remember that it needs to compete with the Annihilating Light, but it also needs to compete with things like a +1 to physical skills, +1 to all skills wand, or a couple of unique options as well. So with Wave of Conviction, it has effectiveness of added damage 330%. What this means is that if you have full-on Battlemage and you've got a weapon that adds 500 flat elemental damage, then Wave of Conviction is going to get 1650 added damage. And this high number is to ensure that a clunky skill like Wave of Conviction can compete with skills that can hit much more easily, such as Arc. Now this 1650 is going to also be modified by whatever this percentage is that's mentioned in Spellblade support. We don't yet know what that is. So let's have a look at how much you gain from Wave of Conviction by instead gaining levels, because the opportunity cost of using Spellblade is that you're not going to be gaining spell levels. Your prefixes on your weapon are going to be dedicated to dealing probably elemental damage, but maybe physical damage, and as a result, you're going to be missing out on some of those levels. The Wave of Conviction, if your gem level is only 15, you have 795 to 1192 damage. If you can get about 140 added damage, that's going to take you up to the damage you would do at gem level 16. But remember, 140 is after the effect of that 330% effectiveness of added damage stat. And for that reason, all you need on your weapon in order to go up from gem level 15 to gem level 16 is about 40 damage on the weapon. If you've got that, then with Wave of Conviction, you're going to end up doing more damage than you would if you had a +1. However, this is not the case when you start looking at a gem level of 21. So if your gem level is 21, you're going to need to add about 250 damage to equal the damage that you would get from an extra gem level. Now again, you've got that 330% multiplier there, so it's actually only going to need to be about 75 damage on the weapon, but that's starting to get a little bit higher. What about if you've stacked a whole lot of other sources of plus gems already on your character, and your Wave of Conviction is at level 28, without considering your weapon? Well, at this point you need about 600 extra damage to gain the same benefit that you would get from +1 gem level, and that's going to mean you'll need a weapon with about 180 added damage on it. So it becomes much harder to gain the effect of one level each time that your gem level goes up. Ultimately, the benefit from adding more gem levels multiply together, so they're like more multipliers. The benefit from flat damage adds together. It's like an increased modifier. Now, while it is the case that for any more multiplier, there is an increased modifier large enough that it is actually better than that more modifier, it is often going to be the case that gem level scaling will win out. However, there are scenarios where gem level scaling is not an option. Some gems have unique mechanical effects that come into play when you're at higher gem level that might be detrimental, and there's some interesting discussion which I'll put a link to down in the description of this video below to some discussion that's going on the PathOfExile build subreddit around the skill gem Stormbind. But I also wanted to raise the option of cast when damage taken support. Cast when damage taken support builds are pretty popular at the moment in the form of ward loop. However, you can definitely do a lot of other things with cast when damage taken support as well. One of the key things with cast when damage taken support is that it is encouraging you to use a very low gem level. For example, if you are using cast when damage taken support at gem level 1, then you can only support Wave of Conviction up to gem level 7, and Wave of Conviction at gem level 7 does 90% less damage than Wave of Conviction at gem level 21. For this reason, you probably aren't that interested in scaling gem levels on top of that. You instead want to scale lots of flat damage, and this is something that you could conceivably play around with. Cast when damage taken support, Spellblade support, both linking to some low-level spell gems that don't do very much damage on their own, but get a huge amount of added damage from your weapon. And of course, we've only really been looking at Wave of Conviction here, but there's no reason you have to use that specific spell. It's probably a bit clunky for a cast when damage taken setup anyway. You're likely to want to use something else. So that's my first thoughts on Spellblade support. Unless the numbers are unexpectedly high, it doesn't compete with the Annihilating Light in softcore. It doesn't compete with a +5 gem level staff. It doesn't compete with using a +1/+1 weapon in each hand, or a +1/+1 weapon in your main hand, and a shield in your offhand. However, it may well be that in some niche cases where you're forced to use a low-level version of a gem for some reason, Spellblade support may provide a really substantial amount of damage, and additionally, you will be able to use a high-level Spellblade support alongside a low-level cast when damage taken support, which could be quite interesting, especially in conjunction with weapons that do a very large amount of total damage, such as a well-rolled Rebuke of the Vaal, and especially if that Rebuke of the Vaal is not of any real interest to attack builds because it has low attack speed. If all of these things line up, then this could be a quite useful support gem. Now next we're going to have a look at the Kirac Mods. So Kirac Mods are one of those things that are really simple but have a huge impact on the way the league is played, and also if you play in Trade League, they have a huge impact on the total demand across the entire league for certain types of materials. Chaos Orbs being one of them, but they also impact the supply of essences, and through the use of strongboxes, they impact the supply of Scarabs as well. It's also particularly the case that since patch 3.20, the percentage chance of encountering some of these mechanics, at least if you spec'd into them, has increased substantially on the Atlas, and also players generally have more access to rusted Scarabs. This means that Kirac mods that replicate the effect of a rusted Scarab but that don't stack with a rusted Scarab are generally considered pretty dumpster tier. That's what happened with Expedition in patch 3.21 and why almost no one used it as a map device mod. Let's start by noticing what is conspicuous in its absence. We do not have Ambush, the one that allows you to force additional strongboxes onto maps, and this is a big deal because ambush gets used a lot in high-end juicing strategies. We also do not have Heist on the map device, which means that there will be a lot less blueprints and contracts doing the rounds in this league, and we can expect that there'll be some pretty substantial increases in the trade value of things that only come out of Heist as a result. Additionally, the lack of Heist on the map device means that you do not want to plan around having leadership's price on your build very early in the league, because it will take a little while until people start getting access to the Twins encounter. Now let's look at what we do have. Essence is the big one. Essence is only 2 Chaos, and we don't know yet how many Essence monoliths this is going to add. Sometimes it's added 1, sometimes it's added 2 or more, but even if it only adds 1 Essence monolith, it's going to be a pretty decent deal at 2 Chaos, and it's probably going to add more than that. Essence is something that is incredibly strong if you want to get your character started at the beginning of the league and you're running in low tier maps. Essence is absolutely phenomenal for this. Just be aware that really juiced up Essence monsters, especially if you take the node that gives a percentage chance for monsters that are imprisoned in Essence monoliths to have 3 additional Essences on them, these can create some very, very big, very tanky bosses that can sometimes have more effective hit points in a tier 10 map even than a pinnacle boss does. If you do find yourself struggling with those, remember that you can always unspec that node that gives you a chance to have 3 additional Essences on it, and then just spec it again once your character's powerful enough to deal with those monsters. Domination will add a bunch of shrines to the map. Domination is incredibly good in conjunction with the unique helmet, the Gull. However, fair warning, the Gull has been made rarer than it used to be. The Gull used to be a pretty common item. Nowadays, the Gull appears to be either a tier 1 or tier 2 rarity unique. This means that it is at least as rare as Chevron's wrappings, and possibly rarer, so don't count on getting your hands on this early, even in Trade League, because whenever Domination is on the map device, every Zoom player at least seriously considers running the Gull. It will make their progress through the Atlas a lot faster because you'll just get so many acceleration shrines, and when you get them, you'll be zipping around like crazy. So Domination is really good if you own the Gull, and it's okay otherwise just to add a bunch of extra packs, but it can be a little bit more marginal. Breach is next, and that's going to live or die based upon the number of additional breaches that it adds. There has been a fair bit of additional interest in Chaeola Jewels this league, so you may find that people are running breach strategies a little bit more than last league. Harbinger is next, and Harbinger is a really big one. Harbinger stacks on the map device with relevant Scarabs, and also with the Sextant mod that causes all Harbingers to drop additional loot, and for there to be an extra Harbinger. And this combination is a really strong farming strategy. With Harbingers, there's 3 main types of loot that matter. There's Mirror Shards, which are so rare you probably won't see one. There's Ancient Orbs and Ancient Shards, which drop fairly commonly. And there's Fracturing Orbs and Fracturing Shards, which seem to be 40 or 50 times as rare as Ancient Shards, i.e. you're not going to see many of these, but they end up being the single biggest contributor to the amount of loot that you get. There's also a couple other things you'll get that are useful: Exalt Shards, Annul Shards. These are not going to add up to a large amount of wealth, but they are something that are useful to have your hands on just for your own crafting. All in all, Harbinger tends to be a pretty rewarding option, and definitely if you're interested in going all in on it, taking all of the Atlas passive support for it, and also using Harbinger Scarabs and Harbinger Sextants when available, you will find that you'll make a bunch of currency from this. At least you will, unless there's any changes in this league that reduce demand for Fracturing Orbs, and if that happens, then Harbingers are going to fall off a cliff. Next you have Legion. Generally speaking, you're not going to want to use the Kirac mod for Legion unless you are also using a Scarab that improves the power of every single Legion in the map. So that is Polished and Up that will do that. But once you're doing that, Legion on the map device is a really strong effect if you're able to instantly clear Legions. You'll find that you will be showered in loot for doing so. Finally, we have Delirium and Ritual. Delirium used to be an S tier Kirac mod even when it was more expensive than it is now. It used to be 16 Chaos to run. I don't think that's the case anymore, and I don't think it's going to be overly popular at 10 Chaos. You can use it in conjunction with the new Keystone that modifies the way Delirium works if you want, or you can use it without that, but I think in general, if you spec all of the options for increased chance to get the Delirium Mirror to appear in every map, you're going to be able to get your chance to have the Delirium Mirror up to 42% without content blocks, and considerably higher than 42% once you add content blocks into the equation. And for that reason, I don't think it's worth spending 10 Chaos to go from a 42 to 50 something percent chance up to 100%. There will be occasional times that it is worth doing that, and that's going to be the case if you are using certain sextants that are quite expensive. Then in that case, you're definitely going to want to use Delirium on the map device. But I think for most people who are running a Delirium strategy, you're probably either running Delirious maps, and therefore you're unable to use this Kirac mod, or alternately, you're running a Delirium mirror strategy that's a little bit lower in juice, and you're okay with RNG deciding whether the Delirium mist appears or not, because it will be in most of your maps. Of course, you can definitely play around and find your own strategy, and you might find that you get more use out of this than I expect. And then from something that was once S tier to something that has been solidly in the dumpster for a while, Ritual is a perfectly interesting mechanic. The problem is, it's just not worth 10 chaos, and it's not close to worth 10 chaos, unless there's major changes to how Ritual works in the upcoming patch notes, and it does look like there may be 2 Keystones dedicated to it, so there may be some significant changes coming. Ritual just isn't something you're going to want to use here. So a couple of quick final notes about Fortune Favours the Brave, and then also about the effect of these Kirac mods on the League economy more generally. Fortune Favours the Brave picks one of the other 7 mods at random. It can pick ones that you have not yet unlocked, and it then applies it to the map that you're running. This seems like a fantastic deal at first look, because the average cost of the other mods is just under 6 chaos. But in reality, it tends to be a little bit worse of a deal than that, because Fortune Favours the Brave is often going to give you something that does not synergize in any way with your Atlas passive tree. For example, if you have a Breach Spect Atlas, you might consider paying 4 chaos to get Breach on your map to be a good deal. But if you have a Legion Spect Atlas with no synergy with Breach at all, you might run past a Breach if it's in your map. And so as a result, the 3 chaos you spent on Fortune Favours the Brave that then gave you the Breach outcome is going to be a complete waste of 3 chaos orbs. Fortune Favours the Brave does have some Atlas support, and that makes it a lot better. In 321's Atlas, there is a node that grants 10% pack size, 10% map quantity if you use Fortune Favours the Brave to enhance that map. This is a good deal. However, there is a shake-up coming of the Atlas layout, and one of the areas that's impacted is actually that cluster. So for that reason, we don't actually know whether Fortune Favours the Brave is going to have that bonus or not. If it does, fantastic, you're going to use this a lot. If it doesn't, I think Fortune Favours the Brave is only going to be used in order to do challenges, and then never really touched again. Finally, the impact on the entire League economy of this package of Kirac mods. I think we're going to see a League where Chaos Orbs are going to be in moderately high demand, and as a result, I don't expect we're going to see a repeat of early Sanctum League when Divine Orbs hit 301 Chaos Orbs for a short period. There are going to be enough players who are just simply trading for every Chaos Orb they can get their hands on in order to just grind Harbinger map after Harbinger map, or to grind Essence map after Essence map. These people are going to remove enough Chaos Orbs from the economy that we probably won't reach that point. And that said, this is not the best set of Kirac mods we've ever had either, and so I wouldn't be surprised to see Divine Orbs hit the 220, 230, 240 Chaos range this League. Although, of course, that's going to depend on a number of other factors, such as the balance between veteran players and new players, the rewards of the Sanctum content, and also, most importantly of all, the rewards of the new content. Is the Ancestor content giving out Divine Orbs semi-frequently? Or alternately, is the Ancestor content giving out large stacks of Chaos Orbs semi-frequently? Either of these could have a big impact on the economy. That'll become clear over the first few days of the League, but for the moment I think it's pretty reasonable to assume we're not going to see 301 Chaos Orbs to the Divine, because there's going to be more demand for Chaos Orbs than there was early in the Sanctum League. That's all I got on this. May your Orbs have interesting results, and I will see you tomorrow when there will be new teasers again.